The top performer of the theater troupe was once murdered, becoming a pitiful modern little cabbage, yellow in the ground. Although I have earned a living for decades, these days are also too miserable. Rolling up her sleeves, Suyu first took good care of her body, then passed the college entrance examination, joined a theater troupe, and became a master, making a living. And the Su family, watching the rural girl, who had been completely ignored by them and had no sense of existence, suddenly brought back countless trophies and even entered the circle they couldn't step into, becoming an unattainable existence. Then, at some point, a man with a hint of evil energy appeared next to her. Despite wearing a very serious suit, he couldn't resist the evil energy and looked terrifying. Keywords of the novel. After entering the city, I became a pear garden. Everyone has no pop-ups. After entering the city, I became a pear garden. Everyone can download the complete text. After entering the city, I became a pear garden. Everyone can read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Sorry, sister, sister. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Sorry, sister, sister. Suyu watched as the Su family's car left and stood for a while before finally carrying her backpack into the school gate. She hasn't fully recovered yet and is a bit weak, so she walks very slowly. Everyone rushed to morning self-study all the way, but no one focused on her. There are still 3 months left for the college entrance examination, and in key high schools like number 14 middle school, there are no students who neglect their studies, and everyone's nerves are tense. The more excellent a person is, the harder they work. Bang! Suyu propped her hands on the ground, her gaze fixed on the ants in front of her who were startled by the sound of her fall and let out a sigh. She has just arrived in this world and is unfamiliar with the place. To be honest, she really doesn't want to cause trouble or trouble herself, but why is it that someone is so immature? A helpless smile curved from the corner of his mouth, and he stood up slowly, patting the dust on his hands. He lifted his orchid finger and took out a pure white cotton handkerchief from his pocket, carefully wiping his 10 fingers. That particular appearance doesn't seem to come from the countryside at all. Watching her movements, Su Xian thought to herself. Suyu, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it just now. You didn't fall in pain, did you? Dad said you were just discharged from the hospital a few days ago and your body hasn't recovered yet. It's all my fault. If it weren't for my fear of delaying class and rushing back to morning self-study, I wouldn't have bumped into you. Would you blame me? Su Xian's face, which was as big as a palm, was full of concern. Suyu remained silent, carefully wiping her left thumb. The girl Zhou Lu, who was with Su Xian, frowned displeasedly as she looked at Suyu's impolite expression. She pulled Su Xian and said, "Why did you tell her so much? If it weren't for her walking slowly in the middle of the road, you wouldn't have bumped into her. Besides, what time is it now? Everyone is studying every minute. Who, like her, is a transfer student with some spare time wandering around, thinking this is a vegetable market." The Su family knows a lot about bringing their daughter from the countryside to the capital, and her parents also mentioned it at home. If it weren't for this, she wouldn't have known that this new transfer student was actually Su Xian's half-sister. But Su Xian has good grades and a good personality. Why does Suyu look gloomy and impolite? As expected, I grew up in the countryside and couldn't stand the stage. Su Xian pursed her lips, lowered her gaze to cover the smile in her eyes, and tugged at Zhou Lu's hem. Don't say that, Suyu is just new here and not familiar with her. Plus, her body hasn't fully recovered yet, so she's walking slowly. It's not her fault. Upon hearing this, Zhou Lu looked even more contemptuous and sneered at Suyu. Did you not recover your body? I don't think it's not because you didn't recover your body, but because you didn't recover your mind. I really don't know what the school is thinking. Even someone with a history of suicide would dare to be recruited. If there were any more thoughts that you couldn't think of, you wouldn't be afraid of causing trouble to the school. Besides, number 14 middle school is not a garbage school in a small county. You can let people get by and lower the school's admission rate. A passing student heard this and instinctively looked towards Suyu. To be honest, they were not interested in the conflict between these three people at all, but Zhou Lu said that the girl wearing a particularly long black down jacket would lower the school admission rate, and everyone's footsteps couldn't help but pause. The admission rate of a school is not only related to its future enrollment resources, but also to what kind of alma mater they will have on their future resume. Number 14 Middle School is located in the western city, only 3 kilometers away from the imperial city. Those who can study here are not ordinary children from ordinary families. For them, grades are important, and the reputation of their alma mater is equally important. They and their parents will not allow anyone to smear the school. In March of the capital city, it's getting cold in spring. It's not until 7 o'clock, and when the wind blows, cold people can shiver. A group of about 10 students, in groups of 3 or 2, stood there quietly watching Su Yu and Su Shen. Su Yu seemed oblivious to their gaze, folded her handkerchief and stuffed it back into her pocket. She rubbed her hands, which were so red from the cold, and muttered to herself that this place in the capital is not inhabited by people. It's no wonder she didn't want to go to the capital to perform on stage before. As soon as I thought of this, I couldn't help but think of my master again. However, the relationship between the plastic master and her disciple quickly set her master aside and drew her attention back to the 2 people in front of her. To be precise, it's on Su Xian's body. With a gentle and friendly smile, he raised his right hand slightly and said, "I'm sorry, sister." Before Su Xian could react on why she wanted to apologize to herself, she fell backwards. Bang! Suyue furrowed her brows and felt a lot of pain as she looked at it. "Suyue, are you sick? Just now, the students said it wasn't intentional, why do you still push her?" Zhou Lu was momentarily stunned by Su Yu's movements, then quickly went to help Su Xian and didn't forget to shout at Su Yu. Su Yu tilted her head and smiled innocently, "I also said I'm sorry." After finishing speaking, she closed her collar, pulled the zipper to the top, and walked towards the direction of the classroom. When she saw a classmate looking at her, she didn't forget to smile sweetly at those classmates. The students who were originally still watching didn't feel friendly when Su Yu smiled, but instead felt a bit uncomfortable. They frowned and left. Su Xian was pushed down by Su Yu, causing him to fall on his butt. Zhou Lu helped him up for half a day before pulling him up. "I thought it was a sick seedling, but I didn't expect it to be so strong." Su Xian gritted his teeth secretly, but couldn't curse at Su Yu like Zhou Lu did. He also spoke for her to show his magnanimity and kindness. Shen, you have such a soft personality that you haven't been bullied to death by that country bumpkin at home. Your father is really one of them. He hasn't said he wants to bring people back for so many years. Seeing that you're about to take the college entrance exam, he brought people here. Isn't it delaying your studies? Didn't your mother say anything?" Zhou Lu helped Su Shen defend her. Su Xian smiled helplessly and remained silent. Her mother didn't agree, but Su Yu was left in her hometown for 8 or 9 years. A few days ago, she committed suicide and almost lost her life. Even if Su's father didn't like this daughter anymore and had no relationship with her, he couldn't just let her go. Otherwise, their old Su family would really be stabbed in the spine. Grandpa Su will not agree either. Zhou Lu felt heartbroken at her smile and said, "Why don't I stay with you at school? At least we can wait until we pass the college entrance examination." Su Xian shook her head and said gently, "No need, my mother bought me a house specifically for my college entrance exam. If she comes to live in the dormitory, I'm afraid Uncle Su will be unhappy in his heart. Besides, Uncle Su originally said he wanted me to take care of Su Yu more, it's okay." Zhou Lu saw that she persisted and didn't say anything more, but she thought in her heart that she was at least Su Xian's best friend and couldn't just watch Su Xian be bullied like this. "And Su Yu, who returned to the class, didn't care about the gazes that fell on her. She sat alone in the back row, holding her cheek with one hand, quietly thinking about her thoughts. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Renting a house. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Renting a house. Suyu didn't quite understand why Su Jianjun had to go to great lengths to get her to this school. She knew that the original owner's grades were in a mess, and even if she entered such a school where all the top students were outstanding, what would happen? And it's uncertain whether it's a good thing for a poor student from the countryside to come here. Don't be fooled by the appearance of each scholar, but they are much more open-minded than those who have never read much. Besides, there are still 3 months left before the college entrance examination, which is like taking the imperial examination. The difficulty is too difficult for someone like her who can only barely understand the meaning of the essay. Suyu felt like sighing again. She didn't want to take the imperial examination. She couldn't possibly hear the shout in her heart, but the bell for early self-study rang. English morning self-study. The teacher didn't even talk about the text when he came in, he just asked everyone to memorize vocabulary. The sound of Lang Lang reading rang out, and Suyu heard one head at a time. What's all this chattering about? I can't understand any of them. The teacher knew what was going on with Suyu and didn't even glance at her during class, clearly not taking her seriously. Suyu spent this day mostly in the neglect of various subject teachers. She felt that if every day of these 3 months had passed like this, the book wouldn't have been so difficult to read. After school, Suyu has no plans to attend evening self-study. Just kidding, she still has to find a place to practice the skills she learned in the previous drama troupe. She doesn't have the time to make a headache-inducing exercise book with those students. It's just that the original owner has never been to the capital before. Although Suyu visited the capital a lot in her previous life, the capital she visited was different from this one. Now, she's also very blind and her eyes are black. Fortunately, with a mouth under my nose, I walked along the school for over half an hour and saw a rental advertisement posted on a roadside utility pole. Suyu intended to tear off the advertisement at that stop, but it was too tight and almost broke without tearing it off. I touched my pocket and found no money or phone except for a handkerchief. Fortunately, her memory has always been particularly good. Suyu took down the address and phone number on the advertisement and went to ask for directions. This way of asking is not just about grabbing someone. There are many migrant workers in the capital who come to work and earn money. They usually pay attention to their own 1 acre and 3 fun land, so asking for directions and finding those people is definitely not a good idea. Suyu stared at the kind of person who spoke in a Beijing accent and was particularly familiar with this area. At first glance, it was an old man and old lady who had lived there for many years inquiring. In no time, I found the location of the address on the advertisement. Looking through the crack in the door, looking at the dilapidated and dirty yard, and then at the grassy entrance, Suyu suspected that this place was really inhabited. It was a bit absurd and desolate. However, the doorbell still rang. This house is a quadrangle courtyard with a vermilion hanging flower gate and 2 small lions at the entrance. The round door nails and paint on the door have almost peeled off, making it look very dilapidated. After waiting for a while, just as she thought there was really no one living, the door was pulled open from inside, revealing the face of a thin and fierce-looking old man. "What are you doing?" "Grandpa, do you want to rent out your yard?" Suyu smiled and didn't care at all about the old man's attitude. The old man glanced up and down at Suyu, his eyes full of disguises. "The yellow-haired girl hasn't even grown hair yet, don't come and cause trouble." With a snap, she closed the door. Suyu, who had been shut down, didn't expect this old man to have such a bad temper that the doorknob almost hit her nose. Silently cursing and then knocking on the door. When the old man came to open the door this time, Suyu ignored his attitude and squeezed into the yard. "What's wrong with you, little girl? Who let you in? Hurry up and get out." Otherwise, don't blame me for driving you away with a stick. The old man had never seen a skinny little girl like Suyu before, and his face became even more fierce as he was taken in by her. Suyueli ignored the old man and turned around to find that the exterior of the house didn't look very good, but the ancient style inside was well maintained. There were also murals on the entrance of the main hall, which mixed old and new. It should have been repaired not long ago. Grandpa, your house looks pretty good. The advertisement says rent is negotiable. Which room do you plan to rent? How much does it cost per month? Suyu asked directly, feeling quite satisfied. She didn't like buildings that looked like they were about to extend into the clouds, but according to the original owner's memory, most of the houses here were high-rise buildings, and small courtyards like these became rare species. Otherwise, she wouldn't have left when she saw the rundown yard. Who told you I'm going to rent a house? They all said so, hurry up and leave. You don't understand people, do you? Grandpa, are you worried that I don't have money? Don't worry, as long as the price is reasonable, I will definitely give the rent. We intellectuals are all honest. Suyu said seriously. But this old man didn't know what was going on. No matter what, Suyu refused to let go of renting a house. Seeing Suyu's footsteps not moving, he simply took a broom from the yard and drove the person out. Suyu had no choice but to go out first, but she had no intention of giving up like this. She is a person, as my master said, born with a rebellious nature. The more others refuse to let her do something, the more she has to do it. So originally, I only had a third liking for this house, but now I have to rent it even if I don't rent it. After lingering here for a while, Suyu touched her already hungry stomach and prepared to return to the Su family first. Just a few dozen meters out of the courtyard, I heard the sound of a car coming. Suyu glanced back and saw the shiny black car, which looked even more advanced than Su Jianjun's car, parked at the entrance of the courtyard where she had just come out. The car door was opened, and the driver came down first, followed by a long-looking leg wearing a pair of shiny leather shoes. Looking at the person's appearance, Suyu couldn't help but click. This beautiful appearance is suitable for playing the handsome Lang Junwoo and Panon. With a sigh, I turned my head and didn't continue to look. She's not a girl of 17 or 18 anymore, she won't be a flower lover. Pei Yan, who was helping his grandmother out, seemed to have a sense and glanced at the direction in which Suyu was leaving. I saw a back figure dressed very bulky, tall, and with particularly long hair. I don't know if your uncle and grandfather will be willing to come back with us this time, the old lady, dressed in exquisite British countryside style, said with a worried face. Pei Yan remained silent, supporting the old lady at the door, waiting for the driver to knock. The old man inside the door thought that Suyu, the rolling knife meat, had not left yet. He opened the door and was about to curse loudly. Facing Pei Yan's delicate and evil face, he choked on his stomach. However, his face looked even worse, and without saying anything, he slammed the door shut. Mrs. Pei was obviously not the first time she had been shut down. Not surprisingly, she stood outside the door and spoke softly, Shulan's illness can't be delayed. Even if you don't want to see us, you can't watch Shulan suffer like this. After waiting for a while, Mrs. Pei thought she would not see anyone again like before. She pursed her lips, feeling a bit disappointed and a bit disappointed. She held on to Pei Yan's hand and turned around, ready to leave. Unexpectedly, with a creak, the vermilion door was opened again. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Night Self-Study. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Night Self-Study. After the first evening's self-study class, Su Shen was correcting a mistake in translating classical Chinese into Chinese. Classical Chinese has always been her weakness, and every time she loses points, except for essays and some objective questions, she almost always has classical Chinese. She is about to take the high school entrance exam and attaches great importance to this part of the score. After all, the score of the college entrance examination can be a hurdle. Sushin, I just went to the restroom and heard that your transfer student sister didn't even attend evening self-study. She's the only one like her. I'm really curious. How did your family get people in here? My younger sister is about to take the high school entrance exam, and her grades have been consistently mediocre. She's worried that she won't be able to get into our school. Our classmates, as well as our front and back desks, you've also revealed this. When I go back, I'll talk to my parents and save them from constantly nagging. The girl sitting in the back row of Su Xian patted her shoulder and asked with a smile. Su Xian's thoughts were interrupted and he felt a bit unhappy. When he turned his head, he couldn't see it on his face and smiled warmly, saying, I'm not very clear about this either. I'm not good at asking about Uncle Su. The girl glanced at Su Xian after listening, feeling bored and too lazy to say anything more. Su Xian looked at the Chinese test paper in front of her, but she couldn't bear to read it anymore. So you only came to school the second day today and didn't even attend self-study late. Is she very confident in her grades? Uncle Su struggled to get her in, didn't she think about cherishing this hard-won opportunity? Is she not afraid that Uncle Su will be unhappy? Su Xian actually doesn't have much liking or dislike for a half-sister who has never been together before, but unfortunately, this sister appeared suddenly and immediately attracted Uncle Su's attention. Will she still have a place in the Su family in the future? After 11 years in the Su family, she has already regarded this place as her own home. Even Uncle Su, although calling him uncle, feels like her second father in her heart. Even compared to his biological father, Uncle Su's companionship is even more extensive, and his emotions are naturally deeper. The feeling of her status being threatened made her feel uncomfortable, a bit panicked, and insecure. After all, she is not biological, and the Su family has no obligation to take care of her. Sushin restrained the surging emotions in her eyes and focused her thoughts on the exam paper. Her grades are her biggest reliance, she can't make any mistakes. Suyu knew nothing about Su Xian's thoughts, and she slowly swayed her legs back to the Su family. The Su family bought a large flat floor near number 14 middle school, which is nearly 300 square meters. This was previously bought by Zhao Lan for Su Jianjun to study for Su Xian. Now that Suyu has also gone to number 14 middle school, she naturally follows and lives here. Su Jianjun and Zhao Lan usually don't live here and only occasionally come to take a look. Suyue opened the door with the key and sneered when she saw the unpopular decoration of Hopu. Is that Miss Suyu? Suyue looked over and saw a slightly overweight middle-aged woman wearing an apron, appearing in sight. Aunt Zhang, Suyu shouted with a smile. The nanny quickly wiped the water off her apron and came over to take Suyu's bag. Miss Suyu, give me your backpack. In the morning, Mr. Su called me and said you would be staying here. I have already delivered Miss Su Xian's dinner to the school. Have you eaten it, Miss Suyu? Suyu didn't give her backpack to the nanny and said pitifully, I didn't eat it. Is there anything else to eat at home? By the way, where is my room? I want to take a shower first. The air is foggy, and I always feel a lot of dust. It's uncomfortable not to take a shower. Aunt Zhang quickly took the person to the room arranged for Suyu and went to prepare Suyu's dinner. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Breaking and Pulling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Breaking and pulling. The next day, Suyu stayed at school until the end of class. As usual, she didn't study in the evening and walked towards the house of that fierce old man after class. The weather is good today and the visibility is also high. It will be just 6 o'clock, and the sunset on the horizon will dye half of the sky red, which is very beautiful. A faint halo fell on Suyu, warm and cozy. She is not very agile and walks slowly. When I went out in the morning, I told Aunt Zhang to go back later in the evening, so I wasn't in a hurry. Strolling to the alley yesterday, Suyu was worried that the old man wouldn't open the door. She first asked the neighbor next door to confirm that they were at home, and then went forward to knock on the door. "Why are you so?" The old man stretched his face, full of displeasure. "Suyue learned well today." Before the old man could finish speaking, she slipped in with a short figure under his arm. "It's been said that I don't rent this house. You don't understand people's language, do you?" The old man glared angrily at Suyu. He had never seen such a shameless and skinny little girl before. Suyu wondered, why not rent it? "I see you're the only one living in this house. It's so spacious, isn't it good to rent it out and add some popularity?" Although she had just arrived here, she also knew that people who could live near the imperial city would not lack money, so she did not think that this old man had advertised for renting a house for money before. "What's adding to your popularity? I'm not human. Besides, who told you that I'm the only one living here? You little girl, don't waste my time here. I have something else to attend to and don't have time to greet you. Hurry up and leave." The old man shouted at her. "Don't worry, if you rent the yard, I won't be at a loss. Do you like listening to the opera? If you like listening to the opera, how about I sing it to you every day in the future?" Suyu refused to leave. This place is very close to both the school and her place of residence, and it is also a solitary courtyard with spacious space, which is very suitable for her to come and practice basic skills every morning and evening. If you miss such a suitable place, it may be difficult to find a more suitable one. And she doesn't want to put in any more effort. It has been almost half a month since she became the current Suyu. Due to inconvenience, she has not practiced her basic skills once during this half-month. If her master knows about it, she may have to fight and not see the sun tomorrow. Learning the martial arts of drama emphasizes the word diligence. If one becomes lazy and doesn't practice, it can really become a disaster. The old man was taken aback by Suyu's words, and then his face became even worse. Without saying a word, he pushed the person out without any courtesy. Suyue was inexplicable. Although she had just driven her away, she didn't take any action. Now that she's singing for free to him, why are you still angry? Looking back for a moment, I couldn't find any memories of taboos about singing opera in my mind. And as far as she knows, isn't the country currently advocating for the revitalization of traditional culture? Why does this old man have such a posture? It's unclear, Suyu doesn't want to just leave like this. "Grandpa, if you don't like to listen to the opera, then I won't sing. I saw the news about renting this house on an advertisement posted on a utility pole on the road, and I didn't know that you didn't have the sincerity to rent it. Alright, don't push me, can I stop renting?" Suyu was also a bit angry. She has had an ingrained love for duets since elementary school, even if the old man didn't say anything, she was a bit unhappy. Watching the person walk outside the door, the old man hummed and said, "A little girl, with such a heavy heart, even went to inquire about our preferences in order to rent a house. Who knows what you want to do after renting a house?" Suyue was about to laugh angrily, her pale face tinged with a hint of blush because her body was not completely healed. "Lang Lang Qiankuan, in a rule of law society, what do you think I can do? If you don't sincerely invite me to rent, then I won't rent. Are you falsely accusing me like this, thinking that I am a single woman who is easy to bully? Besides, when did I inquire about your preferences? If I know what you like, why would I have to be kicked out by you in such an embarrassing situation?" The old man saw that Suyu had not been exposed and felt guilty. Instead, he glared angrily and frowned somewhat unexpectedly. "You were just rap acting, didn't you know that my old lady loves to listen to acting? And you, the girl, look just over 10 years old and don't have a strong physique, so you don't look like someone who studies acting. You're young and full of nonsense. Even if I blamed you for my words just now, you shouldn't be running around and talking big." The master's tone was better than before, not so fierce. "Oh, if you're going to say that, then I'll have to tug with you. Suyu made a gesture of rolling her sleeves, hands on her hips, and stood forward a step. Before she even started tugging, she was quite imposing. Which eye did you see me running on a train with my mouth full? And which ear did you hear me talking big? As the saying goes, I don't know the whole picture, I won't comment. Today is only the second time you have met me, how can you determine if what I said is big talk or running on a train? For things you don't understand, opening your mouth is just talking big and running on a train. Do you think your words are fair to me? Also, when I came over yesterday, you said that your house is not available for rent, but the advertisement on the billboard was written in black and white with the words house for rent, rental interview, and you still kept your phone number. If you don't want to rent out the house, why don't you remove the advertisement? Unfortunately, when I came over to ask, you said that the house is not available for rent now, so why don't you just let it go? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Sing a paragraph. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Sing a paragraph. The old man was inexplicably feeling a little guilty by Suyu's questioning. Although he is usually a bit aggressive, he is not an unreasonable person. He was a bit upset about his wife's affairs before, so he accidentally vented his anger on Suyu. Speaking of which, the little girl also suffered from a reckless disaster, and today she was suspected by him like this. It is only right to be angry. But to make him apologize, he can't speak up. The old man coughed in disguise and said, "Why, do you really know how to sing opera?" The topic shifted a bit abruptly, but it accidentally made the little girl in front of her look better. I don't know what to do with the promise I made to you, it's not just about having enough to eat. So, why don't you sing a few lines? If you can get by, I'll let you rent my house. But if you can't sing well, then you should look for another place. The old man still had some doubts about Suyu and didn't think she really knew how to sing. He didn't think she was really good at singing. He said these words just because he was questioned earlier and felt a bit guilty, not like he did before. Suyu glanced at the old man's expression and guessed what his plan was. A gentleman's words are unforgettable. Don't go back on what you said, she said as he spoke. He entered the yard again. It's always difficult to stand outside and sing. The master followed behind and didn't close the door. If you don't sing well later, there's no need for him to open the door again. Suyu learned kunku opera, and naturally chose to sing from it. She didn't know which folds the old man had heard of, so she chose the most well-known one, the peony pavilion, and picked out the soap robe with the fold of dream from it. It's about Du Linyang's nostalgia for the spring scenery in the garden while visiting. She started singing this section at the age of 10 and continued singing until she was almost 30, which was already familiar to her heart. However, the original owner had never been exposed to traditional Chinese opera before, and her body had not been specifically trained, let alone her pronunciation. It is also unclear whether she can sing 1/10 of her previous skills. Although Suyu looked confident, she was still a bit uneasy. After all, it was not her own body. But in order to rent this house and start practicing as soon as possible, she also needs to sing well. Standing with his back to the master, he took a few deep breaths, straightened his back, and slightly tightened his lower abdomen. His right finger unconsciously turned into an orchid, and he sang loudly. It turns out that the colorful flowers are blooming everywhere, as if they have all been given to the ruins of a broken well. The beautiful scenery on a beautiful day is beyond measure. Who would be happy to enjoy their home? As soon as she finished singing, Suyu coughed fiercely and her face turned red from holding back. I couldn't help but pick up the murderer who pushed her into the well and whipped the body to curse in my mind. Originally, he had a good voice, but his body was so weak that he couldn't speak. Singing opera is not only a technical job, but also an individual skill. Not to mention how well she sings with her voice, but also her body. She is afraid of fainting when she forcefully supports herself after singing. When she finally stopped and felt like she could catch her breath, she looked up and saw that there was no one left in the place where the old man was standing just now. Suyu. Are you planning not to admit it? Although she sang a little worse than in her previous life just now, the only thing that satisfied her about her body was her clear voice and a spiritual aura that didn't eat human fireworks. This voice, combined with her years of singing experience, is enough to intimidate outsiders even if her original body and acquired conditions are insufficient. But what does it mean that people are missing now? Suyu, who has been a veteran for many years, is a bit confused. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Rented. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Rented. After waiting for a while, just when Suyu thought that the old man was not going to fulfill the agreement, she saw the old man walking out of the left wing, holding an old lady with white hair all over her temples. The old lady doesn't actually look very old, around 60, but her hair has almost turned white. The whole person is thin and has a bad complexion. But those eyes, looking at it, carried a soft light, like a spring breeze brushing against the face, very comfortable. Suyu was puzzled. What does this old man mean by helping a patient out? Is it difficult to worry about her falling for it, so I want to seek sympathy? In front of the old lady's gaze, Suyu instinctively put away her little thought and revealed a well-behaved smile. Are you the little girl who sang the soap robe just now? The old lady sat down on a stool by the courtyard, her eyes showing kindness, and looked at Suyu. The old man has already told me about renting a house. It's my old man who did something wrong, so I'll apologize to you on his behalf. Since you made an agreement with me, the old man, and he lost again, let's take a look at this house. Which one do you want to rent? If you're interested, just tell the old man directly. The old lady looked very reasonable, but her health seemed to be very poor. After pausing several times, her face turned a little pale again. Suyu looked at the old lady, afraid that she would suddenly lose her breath and dare not speak loudly. No, I didn't inquire clearly beforehand and came to disturb you. If it's not convenient to rent a house on your end, it's okay. I'll just look for another house. The old man next to him couldn't help but snort when he heard these words. He didn't have so much to say later. However, Suyu's cautious attitude towards the old lady made him feel a little better about this shameless little girl. Renting the house to her seemed less uncomfortable. Alright, everyone has said that a gentleman's words are hard to recall. Since I lost, the house naturally needs to be rented to you. Our family has 3 rooms in total, the main room and the east and west wing rooms. The main room is now empty, and I live with the old lady in the east wing room. Please see which one you want to live in. The old man spoke in a stiff tone, his face tense, and he looked reluctant. Suyu glanced at the old man and met his gaze. As soon as he met, the old man paused for a moment, and for some reason, he snorted again, looking proud and coquettish. Suyu ultimately chose a west wing room. Although she didn't know why the 2 elderly people didn't live in the main room, as someone who rented a house, she was too embarrassed to live in their main room. After negotiating everything about the price and rental period, the payment process got stuck. The old man stared at Suyu, unable to speak for a moment. After a while, this girl has no money at all. What house is she coming to rent? When he's the big shot, isn't he? Also, how could this little girl have such thick skin? She dares to come and say she wants to rent his house even though her face is clean. Who gave her the courage? What is that, Liang Ru? I owe you the rent for now, and I'll pay you when I move in tomorrow. Don't worry, the gentleman's words are hard to recall. As someone who is going to college, I will definitely not break my promise. Suyu didn't care at all about the old man's speechless expression and waved her hand. After finishing speaking, he shouted outside, "Grandma, I'll go back first and come back tomorrow." Then he waved his sleeve and left gracefully. The master and others left, then let out a cold snort, put the rental contract in the cabinet, closed the door, and went to pack up. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. White Lotus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 White Lotus. In fact, they are about to go on a long journey and won't be able to come back for a while. If this house is not inhabited, it will be ruined. Now that a little girl lives in, it can keep their house popular. I just don't know if that little girl is someone who can tinker with things. Don't wait until they come back and the house is in a mess. Grandpa didn't think too much either. What matters now is his wife's illness. They are going abroad for surgery, although Pei Yen said the success rate of the surgery is 90%, he is also not at ease. And he has already planned, if his spouse really has something to do, then he will follow along. Anyway, they have no children, no worries, and they also have a companion on their journey to the underworld. It's uncertain that they will be married again in their next life. Suyu returned to the Su family and was about to press the password when the door was opened from inside. When has it been? How did you come back? Said Xiaolan, Suyu's stepmother, frowning and displeased. Su Jianjun and her grandparents are not here, and she is too lazy to pretend to be a kind mother. Besides, she originally asked Su Jianjun to buy this house for her own daughter. Now it's okay to let this stepmother from the countryside live in vain. She's still so immature and doesn't know why she went home after school. If anything happens then, don't blame Su Jianjun on her. The high-end community they live in is one elevator, one household, and there is no need to worry about neighbors coming out to watch the excitement even if two people stand at the door and talk. Suyu is still one of the timid and cowardly rural girls in the Su family, who have never seen the world before. Therefore, when questioned by Xiaolan, she only hangs her head and doesn't speak, looking like she has misunderstood. Xiaolan had no fondness for such a rural girl who couldn't hit a fart with 3 sticks, and didn't expect her to answer. She gave her a sidelong glance and said, "Don't let go yet." Suyue's eyes, covered by long eyelashes, flickered, and she couldn't help but scratch the palm of her hand that was stuck in her pocket. She rubbed and moved half a step to the side. Saying half a step is really a distance of less than 10 centimeters. Xiaolan saw that she couldn't even give up a seat so well, and her expression became even more displeased. She didn't want to say more to her and walked over directly from the side. As the two of them rubbed their shoulders together, Xiaolan didn't know what was going on. Just now, she felt that there was enough space for her to pass by, but suddenly bumped into Suyu's shoulder, causing her to stumble back 2 steps and fall to the ground with a snap. Then she saw the rural stepdaughter timidly looking up, with 2 tears in her big eyes, as if she had done something to her. Xiaolan was feeling unlucky and wanted to criticize Suyu when the elevator door opened with a ding sound. Su Jianjun came out of the elevator and saw Suyu sitting on the ground, tears in his eyes, looking timidly at Xiaolan with a look of fear and reluctance to speak. Looking at Xiaolan again, wearing a brand name and high heels, standing tall in the mountains, glaring angrily at Suyu on the ground. No matter how you look at it, it seems like Xiaolan is bullying Suyu. Su Jianjun walked over with some displeasure. Without looking at Xiaolan, he stepped forward and helped Suyu up. "How are you okay?" Suyue hung her head and shook it, but remained silent. She felt that she actually had some potential to be a white lotus, and seeing how this poor stepdaughter's character came to life. However, having played so many roles as female actresses before is not for nothing, and this crying scene is not easy to capture. Suyu's appearance made Su Jianjun even more determined. It was Xiaolan who was finding fault just now. Frowning and looking at Xiaolan with no expression on her face, "How did you come out? Didn't you say you didn't need to go down and pick us up? Alright, let's go in first." Su Jianjun didn't mention what had just happened, which made Xiaolan, who was originally thinking about whether or not to explain something, somewhat puzzled. However, the momentary nervousness and unease in her heart quickly dissipated. She said that Su Jianjun couldn't have made her look bad because of that rural girl. Grandpa and Grandma Su, who followed behind, were all focused on their grandson Su Yang and didn't even care about the recent incident, nor did they think about asking a question. Lead Su Yang's hand and walk inside. Su Yang, who was just 7 years old, saw Su Yu make an invincible ugly face at her. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Girls will get married sooner or later. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Girls will get married sooner or later. After entering the room, Su Yu saw that Su Xian was also there. I raised my eyebrows but didn't speak. Although she gave Su Shen a push the day before yesterday, she was not worried that Su Shen would tell Su Jianjun about it. At the end of the day, she was just a little girl who was afraid that the sugar in her hand would be snatched away. If she really wanted to hold on to this candy tightly, she would never let her malicious thoughts be exposed in front of Su Jianjun. As for whether she will tell Zhao Lan, she doesn't care. As long as Su Jianjun's perception of her remains unchanged, it doesn't matter what Zhao Lan does. And as long as she can bring back the skills from her past life, what other books will she read? You don't have to rely on Su Jianjun to support you anymore. However, despite that, the Su family already had a share in these things, which she had never enjoyed before. Now, she wouldn't give up on something that belonged to the original owner just because she had the ability to support herself. Su Yu didn't speak to them in the living room. After entering the room, she whispered to Su Jianjun that she had returned and entered her own room. Su Shen watched as Su Jianjun's gentle gaze fell on Su Yu, and the hand hanging on his side couldn't help but tighten. I don't know what came to my mind, but my expression relaxed and I obediently called out. Although Grandpa and Grandma Su don't like Su Yu, they are still good to Su Xian. They pulled her and asked about the school, saying that she has lost weight and needs to make up for it. Su Xian was pulled to speak by Grandma Su, and couldn't help feeling proud again. Whether Su Yu is the biological daughter of the Su family or not, it is a fact that she is not likable. Although Uncle Su is in charge at home, as long as Grandpa and Grandma Su don't like Su Yu, Uncle Su won't be too biased towards her. After a few twists in her mind, Su Xian talked to Grandma Su about school. The college entrance examination is about to take place, and every day as I watch the countdown in the classroom decrease day by day, everyone is very nervous, which makes me a bit flustered. So I think we should just live in school during this period and learn more. Su Xian said this, although it was to make Su Yi and Su Grandma have a bad impression of Su Yu, but they did have this idea. Recently, the time for studying in college has been getting later and later, and she heard from Zhou Lu that their class even has a boarding school where they get up and start memorizing English words after 4 o'clock. It seems that everyone is secretly competing, afraid of being rejected during the college entrance examination. Those people who are not in the same situation as her are all working so hard. If she doesn't work hard, in case there is a poor performance in the college entrance examination, she will lose even her sole reliance. Will Uncle Su still indulge and love her like he does now? Learning is important, and health is also important. You are still young, so don't let your body suffer. Especially if you are a girl, you will have to get married sooner or later, and you don't have to work so hard. You can get into a similar university. After graduation, ask your uncle to find a young and talented person who matches our family background, and you will never worry about it for a lifetime. Grandma Su patted Su Xian's hand and said. Grandpa Su nodded beside, obviously sharing the same idea as Grandma Su. Zhao Lan frowned with some displeasure. Her daughter's grades are so good, of course she wants to get into the best university, which also gives her a good face. However, she couldn't refute Grandma Su's words and only thought to herself that she would talk to her daughter later. Don't be brainwashed by Grandma Su's words. By the way, Xinshan, how has Xiaoya been at your school these days? Are you still used to it? Su Jianjun helped his son turn on the TV and asked after sitting down. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Raising an Immature White-Eyed Wolf. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Raising an immature white-eyed wolf. After hesitating for a moment, Su Xian smiled and said, Xiaoya is doing well at school. I heard from my classmates that she goes to class on time every day, that's it. What is it? Grandma Su frowned before Su Jianjun could speak. There was a strong displeasure in the tone. Grandma, don't be angry. Maybe Xiaoye didn't study late when she was studying in the town across Jiangcheng, so she wasn't used to the pace of classes at number 14 middle school. Su Shen pulled Grandma Su's sleeve and quickly explained. Upon hearing this, Grandma Su snorted coldly and looked at Su Jianjun, saying, I just said why did I have to pick up that child? I've been struggling with my studies since I was young, and I've put in a lot of effort to get into such a good high school here. Even if I don't remember the hard work these people put in for her, I can't believe they didn't attend class as well. Such a dead girl should have dropped out of school and started working, and let her see if the outside world is as good as at home. A white-eyed wolf who doesn't know how to cherish. Grandma Su's voice grew louder as she spoke, and after finishing, she snorted heavily towards Su Yu's room. Su Yu in the room was sitting at her desk, writing hastily, preparing to memorize all the folding and theatrical books she had learned before. She had no time to talk to Grandma Su and the others. Besides, those words were not meant for her anyway. They were like scratching her boots, causing her no loss at all. Moreover, her body was already depleted of qi and blood, and she had jumped into the river to commit suicide before being taken to school by Su Jianjun after less than half a month, which was still very empty. In order to regain her skills as soon as possible, she won't pay attention to what people who don't need to care about say. Grandma Su's words fell into thin air, and her face became even worse. She glared fiercely at the door of Su Yu's room. If she could breathe fire, she might have baked 2 holes in the door of Su Yu's room. She still doesn't know how much money her son gave to get Su Yu into the 14th middle school. If she knew, she was afraid that this would directly pull Su Yu out of the room and scold her. Su Xian couldn't hold back the corners of her mouth as she listened to Grandma Su scolding Su Yu. Grandma, Xiaoye's younger sister may have just arrived in the capital and felt a bit uncomfortable. It shouldn't have been intentional not to go to evening self-study. Don't be angry with Xiaoye's younger sister, Su Xian advised, patting her back beside her. Shen, don't speak for her either. If she could catch up with you, I wouldn't scold her like that. And you see, after all I've said, does this dead girl have any reaction? I came over with her master and hid in the room without even saying hello. All these years of food have been for free. It's really better to keep a dog than to keep such a girl in a movie. Grandma Su doesn't have a deep affection for Su Yu herself, especially after having a grandson. Su Yu's granddaughter doesn't hold much weight in her heart. Judging from her lack of understanding, what she says makes her sound so unpleasant. Grandpa Su on the side thought of Su Yu, who had not been greeted earlier, and his face also darkened. He shared the same idea with Grandma Su about raising an unfamiliar white-eyed wolf. On the other hand, Su Jianjun frowned and said with some displeasure as he listened to his mother's unpleasant words falling on Su Yu, Mom, what are you doing? Xiao Yu is also my daughter at least. What do you mean by saying that to her? Also, I discussed with the school whether Xiao Yu should attend evening self-study. Her health is not fully recovered yet, and it's too late for the school to attend evening self-study. After a while, her health will improve, so it's not too late to go again. Although Su Jianjun seems to be speaking for Su Yu, he actually doesn't believe that Su Yu's grades will lead him to any university in the future. I put in a lot of effort to get her to number 14 middle school, not because I wanted to improve in the highly tense learning atmosphere there, but more because I wanted her to make friends in the class. After all, not many of those who can go to number 14 middle school are from ordinary families. But obviously, not only did Su Yu not understand Su Jianjun's thoughts, but even Su's grandparents did not expect it. Besides, even if the two thought of it, they would still feel that Su Jianjun was wasting money by giving Su Yu money to pave the way, and this money will belong to their grandson Su Yang in the future. Su Shen didn't expect Su Jianjun to say this. He was slightly taken aback and couldn't help but look at Su Jianjun. Seeing that he didn't seem to notice his own caution, he breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Su Yu is clearly inferior to her in everything, but she happens to have a father like Uncle Su who thinks of everything for her. Even because of her poor health, she doesn't have to go to school. In places like number 14 middle school, except for a few, there are no high school seniors like Su Yu who don't attend evening self-study. Her heart felt like a small bug gnawing on it, making her increasingly uncomfortable as she thought about it. Even so, she still had to pretend to be kind and obedient, comfort Grandma Su, and speak for Su Yu. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Cheating. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Cheating. After dinner, it was still early and the school was on vacation tomorrow. Su Xian didn't rush to go to bed, but instead sat on the sofa in the living room watching TV with Grandma and Grandpa Su. I said I was watching TV with them, but in reality, I was chatting with my classmates on my phone. Su Yue didn't come in even after eating. She still has unfinished tasks tonight. How could she go in and sleep so quickly? Glancing at Su Xian, who was looking at her phone, she saw her right hand sliding down and her left hand going to the table to get a cup. She quickly approached with an eye on her face, holding the cup in one hand and holding the bottom in the other, and picked up the freshly made kiwi juice and handed it to Su Xian. Su Xian's gaze fell on her phone, sensing the feeling of injury. She looked up unexpectedly and saw Su Yu grinning happily at her. This strange smile made her feel a bit uncomfortable. Just as Su Xian was about to say something, she felt the new dress she was wearing wet and even seeping into her thighs. Su. Before she could finish shouting, Su Yu glanced at Su Jianjun sitting on the single sofa, then looked at Su Shen with a threatening expression in her eyes. The word "you" behind Su Xian was immediately suppressed, and her face turned red with anger. What exactly do you want to do? Su Xian gritted her teeth and lowered her voice in Su Yu's ear. Su Yue smiled. Just as Su Xin didn't know what she was up to, Su Yue changed her face like Sichuan opera and suddenly felt guilty and sad. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I just saw that it wasn't convenient for you to hold your phone just now, so I thought I could help you get a water glass. I didn't mean to. Can you stop scolding me, okay? Su Xian was stunned and didn't say anything for a moment. What does Su Yu mean by this? Even though she deliberately spilled that glass of juice on her phone, she still looks aggrieved and embarrassed on the other side. What kind of country bumpkin is this? It's just a white lotus flower that's even greener than green tea. Unfortunately, in order to maintain her well-behaved and sensible character, she could only smile and comfort Su Yu. Su Jianjun was originally holding a tablet to read emails when he heard the commotion and looked over. His gaze fell on Su Yu's face. Watching his daughter eagerly glancing at Su Xian's phone, Su Jianjun didn't know what was going on and felt a bit strange. His eyebrows furrowed as well. Shen, hurry up and change clothes. The weather is still cold, don't catch a cold later, said Su Jianjun. Upon hearing Su Jianjun's concern, Su Xian suddenly felt much better. She nodded obediently, said, good, politely thanked him, and then went upstairs to her room. Sitting next to her, Su Yu would lower her head, sit upright, with her hands on her legs, squeezing her fingers with all her might, looking uneasy. Actually, I am cursing MMP in my heart. Her eyes were so obvious just now, why did Su Jianjun remain indifferent? Can't this dad really see that she really needs a phone? Su Yue cursed in her heart for a while, thinking that she might as well go back to her room. It's not too late, and she can barely write a few pages of the play. While hesitating whether to get up or not, Su Jianjun spoke again, it's getting late. You should go back to your room and rest early. Then there was no more. How can this work? Besides her phone, she still hasn't received the rent yet. How can she go to bed? I originally thought of getting a mobile phone first and then naturally asking for living expenses, but she didn't expect Su Jianjun to be so stingy. When his daughter came to the capital to study, she didn't even give her living expenses if she didn't buy a mobile phone. It's unbelievable that this mother opened the door for her and left her at home. But she still has to maintain her character and can't just ask Su Jianjun to give her the money, so she can only go back to the house first. If Su Jianjun really doesn't give her money, then she obviously can only go and tell Mr. Jiang not to rent for the time being. End of this chapter.